Here's one by Anne.
See what they have.
Another.
A walking trick when I sprain my ankle. Okay. I'm gonna see about getting a scooter or something. At Target, yeah.
Even on the back side of the front door. She just said that we could take this one home. Yay! It's going in my studio.
Turn these lights out.
I thought it would be better with the light.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go pack.
Hi, I am in Ann Waterman's apartment in Syracuse, New York, actually the town of Clay, and I thought it would be cool to show all of her artwork, whether it was hers or the items that she has collected over decades and decades on her own and with her husband, Don. So I'm going to first kind of do a panoramic of the apartment, and then Anne's going to join in and we're going to take a look at some individual pieces. What better place to start than in the bathroom? She has every single wall covered, so she must cover the bathroom as well.
Feels okay. Fortunately, I'm in the car all day.
I'm videoing.
You are busy, busy, busy in there. Oh man, my foot. How you doing, hon? God bless you. I'm so sorry that happened, Mom.
There, if you can try to keep that flat,
Okay.
if it's possible.
Well, we'll refrigerate it for the moment, I guess.
That one's done by her son, Mark Waterman.
Well, this is beginning to film. Here, let's put these away.
These are ancient ones collected in Peru from the Nazca people, I believe. I assume that's she and Don when they were first married.
You want to take these two cards?
Yeah.
Neck and
That's a little good little boy.
the thyroid is there and it's all very large. But never done anything.
And her painting studio is her library, an easel, and a painting of her daughter Kathy. Introduce yourself.
You tell me what.
Now,
This is a painting by an old friend of ours many years ago, Don and I, who he was a student at the Art Institute in Cleveland with us. His name is Richard Anaskevich. He's quite a well-known American, he was at that time, became interested through his master's work later at Yale with Joseph Albers, became very interested in optical art, and that's what he was doing as far as for a number of years after this painting. This painting was a huge success at the exhibit for the graduating seniors that year, of which Richie was one. And it's a painting I think his reference to is someplace in Cleveland from windows that he had seen, and it's oil on canvas or masonite, and he gave it to us as a wedding gift. He didn't come to our wedding, but Don brought it up in the car. It was covered with a blanket when he got there to Michigan, where our wedding was to be.
And what year was that?
50, 49, 52. 52, 53. And Richie, Don took the blanket off, and there was the painting. It was absolutely thrilling because we had become so fond of it. It had traveled all over the country, taken the first place in the May show in Cleveland, which was the largest exhibit of the year in Cleveland at that time. So it meant a great deal. And we've had it ever since, and it's mentioned and shown as almost a centerfold in one of a large book on Richard's Anaskevich's work that was done by Abrams and Company, publishing house, and so we're thrilled to have it in there. So it's one of my, it has been one of our prized possessions for all these years, over 60 years now. Here on this unit over here under the paintings, most of it is from Mexico, but some of it is also Peruvian. It's all contemporary, and a collection I've had and Don had for many, many years, and we cherish it very much. The little angels here are very old. They're from Mexico. The figures here, the musicians, are from Peru. We spent a summer in Peru when Don, my husband, was doing a trade fair for the Department of Commerce. So we collected quite a bit of pottery and artifacts from Peru as well. The paintings are ones that I have done since this one with the Mexican pottery maker, pot maker, is from a wonderful old photograph that I had from friends. And I was so intrigued with the shape of and creating the pot. I did the pot before I did anything else, hoping for the best. So.
And how old was the reference photo?
The reference?
The reference photo.
Oh, the reference had to be 70 years old. And then the two figures here are my interpretations of Native Americans from the Colorado, New Mexico area, and composites of photographs and certain references that I had. And then up above is a more current one. I have become fascinated here in central New York with the wonderful old dilapidated buildings and barns and outbuildings. And I decided this was the first one I did, that I would incorporate tombstones with it as a relationship to the life of the building itself as well. And so they move out into space and gradually lose their imagery. And so that's that wall.
Cool, I wondered about that.
Uh-huh. In Mexico City. Martha
Oh.
Godfrey. She was a very fine landscape painter. She
Yeah, I
has
like
passed away.
Okay.
And the one on the top is from, she gave me, it's from Valle de Bravo, a beautiful community, and where she had, and her husband and family had two beautiful weekend homes there. And then below that is San Miguel de Allende, which is a very popular residential community outside of, about a 2-hour drive outside of Mexico City. And in the hills, and it's an old colonial town, has a beautiful church. A lot of wealth lives there, both Native and American and European. And I thought maybe it'd be nice to retire there, except we probably couldn't afford it, so I didn't try it. Anyway, the map there on the left is a map of Mexico City when it was still, I think at the time of the conquest, because it's still the lake, and still the city itself is in the middle of it. And the Spaniards couldn't believe what they saw when they came upon this beautiful city built on a lake bed, which is now Mexico City. It was called Tenochtitlan. And there's still communities there that are still existing as colonias or sections, divisions of Mexico City. Still have the same names. And the map is from the 1700s. And I found it at a wonderful marketplace when we were living in London, and called Portobello, the very famous market on Saturdays, particularly on Sundays. And Don and I, my husband and I, would go every Saturday morning and go through the boxes of magazines and books and so on, and rummage through everything to see what we can find that we could afford. This is a painting from a photograph that I took. We're talking about the nude. Well, that's strictly fantasy. I just decided I wanted to do a nude, and I had this big canvas, and so I started to compose her. And then I looked at, I'm very fond of Bradley's work.
Huh?
And his Art Nouveau style.
Who's Bradley?
He was an illustrator in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Okay.
American. Will Bradley was his
Okay.
name. And so I reinterpreted some of his imagery that he used in his work, which was mainly done as commercial art for magazines and books and so on, and incorporate that into the painting as well.
Cool.
And
It's a beautiful piece. Yeah.
thank you. And this is from, again, one of those wonderful buildings in New Mexico with the adobe brick and boarded up, and some of it coming off and so on. And I was intrigued with the different textures of brick, adobe brick, and wood and surfaces, and incorporating the blue sky as well from it.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah.
Again.
These are jewelries that Kathy, my late daughter, made. And she did some beautiful pieces. My favorite is the piece, the turquoise and the rust red beads. Those are skulls.
Oh.
That she would buy things online.
Pretty.
Oh, I see.
Isn't it lovely? So I'm very proud to have all of those.
Cool.
Beautiful.
From
That's
her.
such a cool piece.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
So, on the end, darling. Enough Madonnas there that I could put them together, cluster them as a grouping. Some are gifts, or something. I bought the wheat Madonna there made of wheat is almost 60 years old, and I managed to keep her almost intact all these years, so very carefully. This one over, of course, is the very famous patron saint of Mexico.
Which one?
The Virgin of Guadalupe, hanging on the door.
Oh.
It's a print from the original painting, which hangs in the Basilica of Guadalupe, just outside Mexico City. And this presentation and framing and so on was done by a dear friend who married, it's a long story, but I'll make it very short. His name was Walter Bujak, also a good Polish name, shorter than Anaskevich, but still. Wally was a very close friend. He came to Mexico while we were living there. After going to Mexico on a honeymoon and deciding to stay. Wally came every summer and traveled around Mexico collecting what he considered to be the most beautiful of their crafts. And then he would drop them off as he went around in our apartment, one room, and then pack it all up and take it back to Cleveland, where he had a beautiful home. We also had a lovely lady named Maria, who came to work for us when at the time of Kathy was about to be born, and she had a son, Nico, who was 5 years old at the time, and she had no job, and she came to the door. We had been told about her and that she came with very nice references, and she came to the door one evening with a suitcase in one hand and Nico by the other hand. And we said, of course, you're not going to stay outside all night. And we had a one room for a maid in the back of our apartment and a little bath. So they moved in, and Maria became part of our dear family. And then discovered that she had a 12-year-old daughter who wasn't living there, but in a village outside of Mexico City. So Agapita came, and they all three lived in that little room. And until Wally, our friend from Cleveland, met Maria and fell in love with her. Now, Wally couldn't speak any Spanish. Maria couldn't speak any Polish or English. But they managed to connect. And Wally said he would like to marry her, but it wasn't necessary, but he would see, and they would figure out how to do it. Get papers for the two children and Maria to come to the United States with him. Wow. And with friends of ours he was an attorney in Mexico City, we managed to get the papers for the children and for Maria. And they all went back to Cleveland together, and Maria said she had fallen in love with Nico, and so they were married, and he adopted the two children. They lived in this beautiful house in Cleveland, and Maria still lives there. She's 92 years old now. Wow. And just the most wonderful lady, and she also had 4 more children by New Wow. And they are all together, and she's hard of hearing, and she can't use hearing aids, she says. And so anyway, we communicate by writing and so forth, or through Nico, her son. And she's going to have, I think, usually has about 22 or 23 people for the holiday. They come to the house and bring food, and she gets up early in the morning and does what she needs to do. And they have a wonderful holiday. So
right, that's neat.
Peter out in front of the house, and we spent a couple of years trying to settle with the squirrels and so on that could get to the feeder if we didn't position it so they couldn't fly over to us, jump over to it or climb it. So we finally worked it out so that the squirrels couldn't get up into the feeder or over from a tree, and we had all the birds that came to that feeder for years, and it was so wonderful. and the little chippies that were in the ground,
The what?
the little chipmunks.
Oh,
Yeah. So Don did that wonderful drawing for me.
What's that black area in the bottom? With the red? Like a hole?
All right, this is a drawing that my son Mark did when he was a student at Syracuse University. And he came home one night with it after a drawing class, and I just fell in love with it. I have to say that it's, of all the artwork that we collected and have, including my own, that is my favorite piece. I just think she is so wonderful. The pose, the angle of the legs. You know, she could be propositioning somebody right from the chair. But I fell in love with her. So I asked Mark if I could buy her. And he said yes, and I've had her ever since.
Cool. So that was in the 70s? 80s? 80s. Yeah, 80s.
And let's see, and this is a print that we bought. I fell in love with it by a Swiss printmaker. His name right now I can't think. Alexander Corby? Alexander. Oh well. It's there, but I just can't think of what it is right now. Fell in love with this drawing of the mother, father, and child. And so we bought it, and I've cherished it ever since. And then over on the other wall is a large watercolor done by a very, very dear friend of ours who's long since passed away. In fact, he's the one who began the surface design program at Syracuse University, and when he retired, that's when Don took it over. Montague Sharman was an Englishman, and he and his wife, Jessie Bones, was her name. She was a very fine watercolorist also. Traveled through the country, and this was a ghost town in Colorado. And I think some of it's exaggerated, but it made the most beautiful composition. And he gave that painting to me. I was just absolutely thrilled to have it, because it's a very fine painting. And this over here, which you probably can't see, is a bird. I've never been able to get, it really needs to have a light on it. And I just haven't done that.
Oh, say it again.
And I was just saying, I wanted to have something I could see of her. She died last year on May 15th of pancreatic cancer. And she left behind 2 children. She was divorced. The 2 children are grown up and living in Cincinnati, Ohio. They were adopted in Mexico because Kathy couldn't have children of her own. And so they're all grown up and doing their thing in Cincinnati, Ohio now. But I wanted to have something that I could come and look and see Kathy if I wanted to during the day. So I put together a whole bunch of different photographs, different ages, and so on, that I would be able to remember her.
And what are her kids' names?
I beg your pardon?
What are her kids' names? Her children? Their names?
Oh, yes, they're over here. We can, if you want to. When we get there, we can do it.
Okay. The
Anyway, no, when we get there, we'll do this one. This is a collection of pottery. It's all except for the small head shards up at the top in the shelf there, which are Mexican, that we collected in Mexico. Those are all pots and ceramics from different periods of time in pre-Columbian Peru. We spent a summer there while Don was doing a trade fair for the government, and we collected pottery from the fields and from farmers that had dug them up, and we packed them up in the bottom of a wooden crate, along with all the crafts pieces that we had collected, contemporary pieces that we had collected, and sent it back to the United States.
And
So all of those are at least 500 to 800 years old, maybe older.
wow. Are they from the Nazca?
Yeah, some of them are.
What? Tell me about that.
I've got the list. It's in the car. I'll show
Okay.
it.
Tell me about that figure.
Isn't he wonderful?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Do you
can't
know
tell
any-
you what it.
not-
I've got the name of it in the car. I'm trying.
Okay.
I found the list that Don had done. Thank heavens, and I repaired it, and I'm taking it over to have copies made of it. This is one of my favorite because it's in. Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that lovely?
Yeah. Show me the lid
Mm-hmm.
over here.
There. And oops, and this is Chunkai, I believe. And we bought this one from a gallery in Lima. Now, I'm quite sure that it's authentic and not a reproduction.
It's a drinking vessel, right? Oh, is it a whistle?
Mm-hmm. I just don't know how to do it.
Very good.
Boy, you can make a pot of tea out of that,
Yeah.
right? Yes. With the mother with her baby. And I've given Mark a couple of them pieces of pottery that I like particularly. And this is, I call him Godito. He's another, I don't know if he's Solinar, but isn't he wonderful?
Mm-hmm.
He's probably about 1,000 years old.
Wow. And pit fired or
Yeah.
on top of the ground fired. You
I know.
You can see the marks from the smoke
From
and the fire.
right. And, well, coil,
Mm-hmm.
because it didn't have wheels. And Roddy and Valerie still have 2 pieces, and Mark does too. I gave each of the children 2 pieces.
Hold on, say
Dad's
it again.
barn. Mark, I haven't seen him do these wonderful washy watercolors recently, but when he did and does do them, they are quite beautiful. And this he called Dad's Barn, and he gave it to his father as a gift. But the sky and the composition and everything is so beautiful, and such a beautiful technique that I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of his talents too. So, and then down below that, darling, is my little, the photo. But it's just for you to have. This is Elena and DJ a few years back.
Who are they?
Yeah.
Who are they?
DJ, my grandson,
Whose kids?
Kathy's, 2 little ones, 26, and Elena, and there's DJ again. I have another photograph in the studio too. And they're doing very well. They both graduated got their bachelor's degree. And this is one of my pride and joys too. This is a photograph of my grandmother, my grandfather, my Uncle John, their son, my mother who was his sister, and my father. And that's me.
Sweet.
Cool. Look at the 2 of them. Aren't they beautiful?
Yeah.
They were a handsome, handsome couple. Yes, and then this is Mexico City. I took each of the children, took Elena and DJ and Kathy down, and then I took Hannah and
Calvin.
no, I mean Calvin and Hannah down to Mexico City for a trip after they graduated. And this was, we were at the restaurant, the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both just fine and doing well. And Calvin has a very serious love, and she's living with him in New York or in Brooklyn. And this is Robbie and Valerie. Who just called. Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty old picture of them, isn't it?
Hmm?
That's a long time ago, isn't it?
Robbie?
Is that, how old is are those photos?
Oh, they're not that old.
Oh, okay.
I would say they're probably taken 5 or 6 years ago.
Can you tell me about the one behind it?
Oh, yeah. My favorite. Is it all right there?
Mm-hmm.
This was the morning after our wedding. Don and I at Dearborn Inn for the night, our wedding night.
In Michigan?
While my mother and father had a roaring party on their own, and they didn't invite us. Anyway, so this was in Detroit, outside of Detroit. And then these two photographs, which I just love,
Mm-hmm.
are in Paris.
Okay.
Not on the honeymoon, because 3 days after the wedding, we headed for Mexico.
Okay.
No.
Wow.
So this was later years when we had reason and we were going to be in London, living in London for a year while he was with the university. So there's their family.
The whole family in the
And then
70s.
this is the pyramid picture of Don, myself, Kathy, Mark, and Robbie, the dog Pomp, and Sam the cat. And couldn't figure out, because I sat down and Sam started to howl and cry. And Kathy said, "Mother, I think you're sitting on his tail." And I was.
Oh, no.
So I had to get up off his tail.
That's funny.
Cute.
Probably the most famous of the Mexican indigenous people. Her name was Donna Rosa, and she lived in outside of the city of Oaxaca for years and years, and she has passed away now, but she was a national measure listed as a Mexican treasure. And she was the one who began making these beautiful pots with the filigree patterns in them. And we visited her and bought 2 of her pots. One I've given away, and this is the other one. And it's one of my prized possessions because it's such a beautiful, it's all done by coil. And I have a beautiful picture of her sitting in an upright dining chair with a high back on it, holding this pot. And when we shook hands, I couldn't get over, and I was mentioning this to Melissa, how dry her hands were, just like wooden sticks. You know, they were so dry. And how she ever used them, and because she obviously didn't do much to take care of them, but she managed to do some of the most beautiful pottery.
Wow.
Okay.
All right, so these are collections of Mexican ceramics up above here on the wall, and some of whom you can't find anymore. You know how things go. There's somebody that does them, and then they pass away or whatever. These are Mexican potteries down here on the table, the little end table.
You talked about your sundials as you have a whole collection. You're sort of known for
Suns,
your sundials.
yes.
You want to know how that sort of happened? How the
Because I
sundials
always
became
loved suns.
your icon? Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I called my studio in Santa Fe the Sunspot.
Oh.
And this is probably one of my most favorite. It's the most beautiful ceramic, and you can't even find them anymore.
Okay. The paintings.
All right, and the paintings are, this is of 2 tribal young women in from pueblos in New Mexico. This I did as a montage of cheese blankets. I saw a most beautiful exhibit at the Museum of
Pause.
Composite from
Wait.
Go ahead.
Okay.
two paintings or two photographs I found of Native American women, and I incorporated them with the pot and the basket. And then the next one is, these are all acrylic on canvas. This one, the next one is Chief's Blanket, Navajo Chief's Blanket. My interpretation of some of them that I saw, an exhibit of them at the Museum of American Indians there in Santa Fe, and decided to incorporate them into a painting. And the birds are very important because the blackbird, crow, raven is the bird of New Mexico. So the next one is another interpretation of adobe brick, boarded up buildings, the coyote fence, which is very relevant to New Mexico because they didn't have any other materials, the Native Americans and the early settlers, and they used thin scrub and made fences out of them to keep their stock in, or keep the coyotes out, or whatever it might be. So that is my interpretation.
Nice.
The next one, I don't know where it came. I did several paintings like this with white figures in them that I made out of clay. I've sold all of those. And then in downtown New Mexico, Santa Fe, I saw this building, and it had these wonderful posts on the outside overhang that were painted and decorated. And I thought, oh, I can see what I can do with that and make a painting out of it. So that's what evolved out of that. The next one is another interpretation of the old buildings in here in New York area, and a big old barn. And this time, instead of tombstones, I did it with children in it. I thought, well, that seems reasonable. I don't know why, but so I put children in it and then let them fade away into the sky. Right. The down below the
Tree of
Tree
Life.
of Life is from Mexico as well, and we carried it in our motorhome all the way through Mexico and back up to here to New York State.
Wow.
Between our bed in the back of the motorhome, and at night it would come up and sit in the driver's seat.
Oh,
When
wow.
we got home. But just before I moved, a few months before, I knocked it over, and it fell on my head. And fortunately, I had a couple bruises, but I wasn't, but oh, it took me 2 days. I put it back together. I was not about to let it, put it in the trash. So it's all put back together again.
Wow.
Yeah, the drawing up above is from London. I went to a party. I was there with a group of students after Don died for the summer for a program for Syracuse University. And I was still there. And I went to a party one evening, on a Friday evening, and Don, of course, was gone by then. I had a young man said he had a roll of, they called them croquis, French for sketches. And he said he had a whole roll of drawings that he had found in an attic from old stained glass windows.
Wow.
And so he said, would you like to see them? And I said, oh, please.
So all the black lines are where the lead would be.
That's right. The breakup, you can see where, and that would be painted.
Cool. The lead came. Got it.
Beautiful drawing. And it's the angel appearing to Mary to tell her she was going to have a baby.
Wow.
And so I thought, oh, I have to have that. Well, then I took 3 more, one for Kathy and Jim, one for Mark, and his wife then, Susan, and one for Robbie and Valerie. And I tried to do it by the saint, but I couldn't find. I think I have. Mark said his is not St. Mark, so I don't know what it is. But I tried to pick them out. At least they're saints drawings, and brought them back, each one.
It's gonna be hard though, because she's right against the light, so
I
you're
understand.
not gonna be able to get a picture of her from more than a silhouette.
Hi, Toby. Toby's an old man now. He's 16.
He says, I have my rights.
He's still cute.
He's such a good boy.
He is a good boy.
Yes, he is.
Okay. Should we talk about the saints, or in the dark painting, or the one
Yes.
next to it?
Well, the portrait painting is an ancestor. His name is Dr. Kosman. And he's one of my grandfather's relatives. And my grandmother didn't want the painting anymore. She'd had it for years, and so she gave it to my mother. My mother didn't want it. So I said, that's all right, I'll take it. So I've had it ever since. He's a good cleaning and so on, but I cherish him. I don't know much about him. He studied in Paris. He married a French lady, and they lived in Chicago, and he died relatively young, I think. He was in his 40s.
Oh, wow.
The Santos, the smaller ones there on the buffet, are they're all Mexican, various degrees of quality, and as far as they all have quality, but as far as true interpretation of anatomy and the tradition that the saints were done in, the European tradition. You can't see that one too well. The one in the back,
Yeah.
is very, very nicely done. The big one is San Antonio, and I found him lying flat at the Laguna Market in downtown Mexico City. Don had left for Syracuse to teach, and with that he left me with Maria, Aga, Gita, Nico, and Kathy in our apartment. A dog, a cat, and a car, and all of that I had to figure out, what am I going to do with all of this? I know I'm taking the daughter, the cat, and the dog with me, and I'm hoping to settle for Kathy or Robbie, for Maria and her children, and so on with Wally. But I couldn't resist him. I saw him using a flat under a table in one of the merchants, and I said, is that for sale? And he said, yes. And he said, I asked him how much. He said, $50, equivalency. And I said, you know what? I don't have $50, but I have two friends here with me. I bet they'll loan me $50 so I can buy it. They did. And I bought him. And then the problem was to get him out of the country, because I went over to the museum offices, and they wouldn't give me a permit to take him out of the country. So what I did was, through a friend whose mother was Mexican-American and visiting in Mexico with one of her children in a pickup truck, I packed him all up. They put him under the seat in the front of the truck and took him to Texas with them and mailed it to me. Mm-hmm. in Syracuse. And Don got him. So we got him here.
Wow.
And Don made the concrete base, because he doesn't have any feet left, and his arms are gone. And he would be holding a baby, I presume baby Jesus. And I don't know what the other hand. I'm not sure. I got a new book on the saints, so I'll be able to look it up and see what it is. All right. The chest is one of my prized possessions, and it's something that Robbie would like to have. So if it stays together and he can get it and so on, why, that's his. It's colonial, Mexican colonial, obviously made as far as the decoration is very crude. It's very lovely. That's what gives it its interpretation from a European decorative motif. And I filled it with linens and so on and packed it in a crate and shipped it to Syracuse. So we have that. This is a bell. And it's a reproduction. I'll ring it when I get up. It's a reproduction that Don bought for my father, who collected bells. And it's heavier than I'll get out. We carried it all the way back and shipped it. It details the elements of the mass that's used, like incense or whatever might be used during different parts of the mass in Mexico. And I think many countries do this as far as use of bells and so forth to indicate different times of the mass. Anyway, so Don made the wooden base for it, and it's a beautiful reproduction.
Okay.
It's not clay, it's metal casting.
Oh yeah.
I have a question. You know that wooden piece that I may not remember that you gave my mom and dad? It's sort of a carved piece of a no, it's a metal piece that's we have. You wouldn't know, but on our mantle, it's metal and it looks like sort of abstract two figures, kind of almost drip metal. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
What is that? Can you tell the story of that? Because I have.
Well,
that
I don't. Don did it. It was part of his.
He made it.
His masters, right?
So he made
Figures.
that.
He took a sculpture
Okay.
as part of his.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
And who are you?
Hi.
What's your name?
My name is Patty.
And who are you to Anne?
I am. I'm Anne's niece, and my daddy's brother was married to Aunt Anne. Yes.
Yes.
So I'm the lucky niece.
We are all lucky to have each other. You bet. Well, let's see. To finish off in this room, that is the gentleman who did the Madonna of Guadalupe in the bedroom, the reproduction, and made that beautiful frame and so on. Did this? It's colored pencil, and it's one of his interpretations. He was a Cleveland Institute graduate himself, and he didn't do much in the way of fine art ever, but he did this, and he sent it to me as a gift, and of course he made this beautiful frame and so on, but it represents the variety of ceramics that in his interpretation of the tree of life and cathedrals and suns and the pots, and there's a Donna Rosa pot there, and did that, and I've always been very, very, very fond of it. I'm so grateful to have it.